Hello. Lights on. Music on. Welcome, everyone. Obviously, a bit of a half turnout in person, but we do have the whole event streaming for those who couldn't make it today. You will see the Mumbli team bringing the menus at the table. Please don't open it yet. It's recreating the dining experience, and obviously there's no restaurant experience without a menu. So, a bit of housekeeping. The menu is designed to give you information, but also to engage you slightly with what we're doing. I do want to make a remark. If you open the menu, you will see 2 QR codes. What you see underneath the QR code is for the other QR code. So we all make mistakes. That's one. So I hope you don't get too confused in that. Right, we have live captioning, mainly for me, when the panel talk will begin later. But I hope you can benefit from it if you need one. So, right, Slido. If you scan the QR code opposite to the one that says engage, you will get to Slido, and if you haven't received the invite to participate in a poll, you can do it now. The question is, what would you rather have lost as a sense, your hearing or your sight? So it's there if you want to have a look at it. But it will also be the place where you can have questions throughout, and we will answer them at the end. It can also be the place where you have feedback, so have a look at that. Right. So, welcome to our first go at an intimate hearing wellness festival. First year. So far, so good. But I would like to invite on stage Emma Frost, without whom we couldn't have actually had a hearing wellness district in the Olympic Park. So Emma, you please join. I'd like to say a few words, and then I'll come back.
Thanks very much. Hello everyone. I guess first of all I'd just like to say a big thank you for making it here today, not only with tube strike chaos but with everything else that's going on in the world. It's really lovely to see you face to face. As I'm sure many of you already know, the UK estimates that 1 in 5 adults live with hearing challenges, and the UN estimates that over 1 billion young adults are at risk of permanent avoidable hearing loss due to unsafe listening practices. So it's really obvious that we need to understand better hearing wellness and what impacts on hearing wellness. Hearing and being heard safely should be a right for all. And today, on World Hearing Day, the World Health Organization is calling upon governments, industry, civil society to implement evidence-based standards for safe listening. And as cities get busier again post-pandemic, and we were just talking actually over coffee, not only as people kind of return to a more sociable and active way of life, as we've learned through the last couple of years just how important it is to have those social spaces, to have the mixing, to have the engagement. We've also understood some of the barriers around that and the impact that, for example, face mask wearing can create for people with hearing challenges. So it's even more important now that we've really started to understand the complexity around hearing wellness and the importance of social spaces and social interaction within that. As such, a new global standard for entertainment venues will be released today. It's the first of its kind. We're taking a step in the right direction to try and understand the connections with hearing needs, hearing wellness, and social interaction in social venues and spaces. And here at the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park, we recognise the quality of our buildings can affect the quality of life in so many ways. We're committed to bringing about positive change. Good sounds must be embedded in good design. And that's something that Plexel, the venue that we're in now, and all the other venues that have taken part in our hearing wellness trial have really understood and demonstrated with the success of the implementations they've been making over the last 6 months or so. Mumbli's Certified for Sound programme is a real step change in mainstreaming the conversation about noise pollution. And London's first hearing wellness district is right here. We're really proud to announce that at the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park. And we're delighted to celebrate the collective efforts of those trial partners, the venues, their staff, and the whole back of house teams that have worked so hard to contribute to making the park a more welcoming place. I'd really like to thank them and congratulate Mumbli, the whole Mumbli team, for shining a spotlight on audio accessibility in everyday life. LLDC, the London Legacy Development Corporation, has actually been part of Mumbli's journey since 2020, when Mumbli was part of an East London Innovation Accelerator Enterprise Zone programme, which focused on supporting startups that had a focus on accessibility solutions. And we've been championing purpose-driven innovation at the Olympic Park because it's always been a core part of our Olympic and Paralympic legacy. 10 years on from the 2012 Games, this remains the driving force behind a new major collective endeavour, and it's the focus for our next 10 years. So in the coming months, we'll actually be unveiling our Inclusive Innovation Programme at Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park. And this will be known as SHIFT, London's Living Testbed. It will place health in cities at the forefront of its agenda to experiment and collaborate towards better urban futures for all. And this trial is a key demonstrator, if you like, that we've been undertaking with Mumbli. It's a perfect example of the sort of practical, everyday, real-world challenges that SHIFT will help to respond to. We focus on improving health in cities, movement in cities, and climate adaptation in cities, and all through a lens of inclusive innovation. We're looking forward to launching SHIFT alongside Plexel, Here East, UCL, Lendlease, UAL, London College of Fashion, and Loughborough University in London later this year. So please do watch this space and keep your eyes and ears open for more news from the Olympic Park and SHIFT. I'd like to finish by thanking everyone who's been involved in Hearing Wellness Trial and invite you to pop over to Hackney Bridge Kitchens, Signorelli's in East Village, and Timber Lodge Cafe that are our new certified for sound venues on the park. And take part in this amazing Hearing Wellness Festival that's been so carefully and creatively curated by Mumbli. A huge thanks for being here and for being part of this conversation and an increased laser-like focus on hearing wellness for all. Thanks.
Thank you, Emma. That was amazing. You can probably call it a day. So let's make it what it seems to be, a restaurant experience. So now it's time to open your conversation menu, and you would have people around you, and genuinely try and have that conversation. Because you're going to have sound going on around, which will reflect the experience of a restaurant. And it's a controlled experiment, so we tested the sound levels before, and we wanted to make sure that we're not damaging anyone's hearing. But you might find it annoying. So it'll be a minute and a half, and it'll just happen. But it'll work if you have that conversation with people around, because then you will have that conversation where at the level where you have conversation, you will see background noise coming over you. So try and have that now. Have a chat. restaurant experience, and you have to take into account the fact that this room has acoustic panels. So if you think that that's all it is, it's not. And that's what we expose ourselves to almost every time. 90 decibels was towards the end, the last 10 seconds. That's what it feels like. And because you're not in a restaurant mindset, it was probably a bit more annoying than it would normally be, because normally in a restaurant having a drink. So that was that. Now, there was this question, what would you rather have, your hearing or your sight? Now, I've experienced hearing reduction 10 years ago, right? And I can take hours to try and explain what it's like and how is it going, but instead of that, I'll play a video. And in case you don't know what it's like, you might get a glimpse into that. So whichever you chose, if you chose sight as being the sense you want to have, this is your chance to use your sight to hear what people are saying.
So when I was really young, probably kindergarten or first grade, I have a much older brother, and we'd go out to recess, and there's this older guy, he might have been in like 5th or 6th grade, that always used to pick on us, and I didn't really know what to do about it.
Today we went to a high school and
I was posing for a picture with all of my girlfriends, and all of a sudden one of them reached over.
So does anyone want to have a go at what they were saying throughout the whole video? Now, the idea is it's not about me. I realize that later, but today about 1 billion people have a hearing challenge. Now, these are people that are being diagnosed, so we don't know the exact numbers. But by 2050, there will be 2.5 billion people with a hearing challenge, for various reasons, age-related, noise pollution, etc. Now, luckily, the technology is incredible. So I'm wearing a simulator headband because I'm going to have an implant in a few weeks, and it's just amazing. Bluetooth streaming, the phone, 4 or 5 big battery life, pretty impressive. But then there's one big enemy, which is the reason why only 20% of those who need a hearing device use technology. And that is noise pollution. So the biggest reason why people do not wear the technology is noise, background noise. It's painful, it's annoying. So the experience you had earlier, that was probably twice more annoying for me than it was for you, without having to compare, because I've been without technology, so I know what it's like. Now, we then thought, well, how do we solve this problem? Right? The noise pollution is quite a big one. So we did a test back in 2019, 2020 in 18 venues. Now, speech levels happen at 60, 66 decibel levels, and I'll put it in perspective in a second. Sound levels in the venues that we looked at were below 70 decibels, but in only 27 venues. In the other venues, conversation is quite difficult, to put it mildly. Without talking the dangerous element, that's another conversation. So that's where we have. Now, 86% of people have left a place because of noise, background noise, and not necessarily having a hearing reduction. So then, we applied for Innovate UK grant. We had it to build the technology, to have it installed in venues, because that was the best way to do it. However, 2020 was 2022 in that whole journey, and this is where we are. So probably this meeting would have taken place a year or so earlier. However, as Emma kindly said, we started collaborating in 2020 and we chose, or we were chosen rather, to set up the Hearing Wellness District in the park. And these are the venues. Now, we thought about how to reveal the data and what's the best way to do it. And so, with the team, we put together a video where we will show you how, what venues, what happened, but most importantly, what are people thinking about what happened. So I'm going to let the video play, and it's the second time I'm seeing it. It was ready this morning at 2:30. So let's have a look at it.
When you open an independent cafe on quite a tight budget, you tend to use quite hard surfaces, things that you don't have to constantly wash, things like polished concrete, exposed brick. You will end up with sound reverberating in the space.
Bad acoustics stems from a high reverberation time. Reverberation time is basically the measure of the echo within rooms. Poor reverberation time comes from hard surfaces, hard materials in that space, which cause the sound to bounce around the room.
The design of Hackney Bridge and the buildings themselves, they're designed to be quite industrial to fit in with Hackney Wick. As such, there's been a lot of hard material used, like metal. So when we do have sound or music inside any of our spaces, the music it tends to bounce around a lot. We get quite a lot of echo and reverb, which isn't good.
And what we are seeing is more and more people trying to work in our cafe. So rather than being an area before where people used to come and just have coffee with someone and go, people are sitting with their laptops on Zoom calls and things like that. And over time, I've experienced it myself, it's actually very difficult to make those calls in these types of environments. And when you're in a very noisy environment, it can become very difficult to actually have a nice conversation with people.
My name is Desmond Purcell. I'm a barista here in Timber Lodge. I'm hard of hearing. When there's background noise and like maybe music's playing a bit loud or other people are talking in the background, then it's difficult to hear. I'll have to lean into closer. You don't get the distinction of the person speaking to. You hear other voices coming over it. So it becomes a muffled noise.
Well, last year, Mumbli, they came on site and they installed acoustic monitoring devices in our food hall, which are very useful because we get to see exactly what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. We get to see statistics day by day, which is fantastic. And it's really useful for us and quite interesting actually to go back on the system and see exactly what we were reading at those times, how high the decibels were, the sound quality. It's great for us because then we know exactly what time of the day, when we should have the volume, high, low.
We can help by installing acoustically absorbent materials in the space, often in the form of either soft furnishings or acoustic panels. Acoustic panels are generally sort of soft or absorbent materials which soak up the sound rather than reflecting it back out into the room.
You'll feel better, you'll feel a slight muffling of the noises that you're used to hearing. You'll probably feel slightly less annoyed or less, if you spend a long time like, our staff do and obviously I do, and we have a lot of customers who sit here for 3 or 4 hours, their overall sensation will probably be better. But if you said to them what's made you feel better, they'll never go, oh, there's some great acoustic panels up there now. Without the data, it would be very difficult for people to quantify.
Using Mumbli's smart technology, it gives us the ability to really get into the readings and data within spaces.
And seeing the data is fascinating, where we were at, where you have peak times, obviously how they do very much marry up with higher trade times, and actually how you see the difference and how you see those dBs just come down. You can only imagine what that does to people sitting in. What we previously found is we would hit a peak time and then you'd have about an hour where it's just the world would disappear, probably because actually the venue had hit a point that it was just too overwhelming for everyone. So it'll be interesting to see if we lose that sort of drop, which is quite significant at an important time, and whether we can just continue that busyness throughout the rest of the day.
Yeah, there was some improvement, of course. I thought myself that I'm actually getting better hearing, but now when I found that actually they put something in, I was like, it must be this that they put some panels in. But I appreciate what you've done. I'm glad that I know what it's about. I'm very grateful, and thank you very much. I've been more mindful to what's going on now. I know, and maybe I'll relax more as well. So I know I have help.
It's important just because we want to provide the best possible experience to our guests. And not just our guests, all of our staff members who work here as well. If we are doing a sports screening, if we are doing live music, it's very important that we get it right and we're not damaging anyone's hearing, we're not getting complaints from our guests.
Mumbli sort of pick up on the discovery side, so they make this sort of world of acoustics quite accessible for the end user. Also have their sort of data collection feed using smart technologies, which is utilised to optimise the space. Resonics then tie in as a partnership to facilitate the installation side.
It's definitely something that I would apply to all venues, and I'd probably recommend to other people to do it as well. It really makes a substantial difference, and one that would be difficult to quantify unless you come and experience it.
Hope you enjoyed that. I just want to reiterate that without the Mumbli team, which is like, there's some of us are in the room, this would have been impossible. Also, please feedback questions if you have, feed them into, yeah. Right. To move on to the journey, so started 2020, and then we had these sort of blocks of time that we looked at. Lockdown kind of kept us back a little bit. Then we started onboarding venues, and then the installation testing started happening in October, December, and I'm sure Leonidas will be able to tell you that installing acoustic monitoring devices was not necessarily the first line of the agenda when they came out of lockdown. So with Karen and with the team, we kind of had all sorts of strategies to get people to come through. But then what you can see is that we actually, in the last 8 to 10 weeks, we had this intensity of collecting data, getting about actually 600 people one-to-one, like surveys in venues to get people to tell us what the experience was before optimization, after, staff members, etc. And then we had this crazy ambition to launch a festival this weekend. So if you haven't signed up for things, we'll still do it, I believe. But then, when it comes to the devices that we installed, many people are asking the question of how it works. And I didn't want us to go too much into the scientific element of it. However, these are some of the points that we look at when we collect data. The most important one is we don't want to record any audio at all, zero. We just want to look at frequency bands, want to look at decibel levels, so that it's scalable, that it doesn't hinge on privacy. These are some of the sketches, the devices that have been done in the last few months. Oscar, our design engineer, had a go at various elements. We 3D printed various elements. You can see the hub, which we learned that one of the biggest challenges was the installation process. It takes 2 to 8 hours to install a venue. We can't scale that, so we needed battery-based technology and so on. So we looked at that. Now, looking at one example of comparison, and this is really interesting, and on purpose, Adam flagged this up as one of the good ones that we can show today. So you can see 2 weeks between 17th and 24th of January. And one would believe that in between the optimization happened, but it hasn't. The optimization happened the week after. Now, this is where the dashboard and the idea of visualization of sound and what it does and how it can damage and kind of translating decibels into meaning had an impact. So this is pure behavioral change. So we had a sit down with Leonidas, we looked at the data, and a week later already things started to come down, and we started looking at this. And this is without optimization. Now, at Signorelli, we had a bit of a different one. So obviously we can look at data, but we thought we'll bring this out instead. So 58% of people agreed that background noise affected them. And then 90% had no issues with background noise after optimization. And in a place where 55% of people are there to work, and probably that's the idea of a cafe, designed for people to stay longer and consume and so on. This is where it starts to be very interesting. So, what this is a dashboard that has been developed in the last few weeks at full speed ahead to be able to show you today live data coming on the screen from the devices. And Ollie, who has helped develop the dashboard, will be there, and we're going to look at Hackney Bridge, what happens in Hackney Bridge now, in real time, what's happening there. And I'm going to talk you through it. So, a quick overview will show that we look at the things that mattered for venue operators as we engage with the dashboard, and we try to understand what matters, what's really important. So we have decibel levels and conversation quality. Easy as that. You can see it moving every 5 seconds. Probably if someone will turn the music up, we will see that. But we won't see it from the fact that the volume was up. It's just from the dynamic of the room. Now, the idea of being certified for sound is not a pass or fail thing. So it's more to do with how you engage with sound. So we have this notification that can be changed and modified to anything. What will be interesting is to ask what we can actually get from this data. Well, what can we get from frequency bands? Can we look at gender differences in the room? Can we look at spend, different times? Can we look at, so there are elements that venue operators started to see that it would be very valuable for them to have. And this is where the feedback from you is important if you have any ideas, and some of you are very close to Mumbli, we would appreciate that. We did some really nice tricks with, if you click on Mumbli, everything disappears, and you can have this as a standalone somewhere, a dashboard for you to see. But if we go further to menu, we want to look into more granular data. Then we have these graphs. And on the left, we have the decibel levels. We can go as granular as 1 minute. So we can expand that. We can look historically. We have a calendar at the top. We can historically look back at however far we want to go. And I'll talk soon about the World Organization and their release on global standards for entertainment venues that they want to have. Noise monitoring apparently is one of them. Thank you, World Organization. Now, on the right, we have conversation quality, which can be translated in different ways. Now, it's numbers, not very interesting, but that is the dashboard today. Now, what in the longer term we can do, we got additional metadata where we can see connectivity with other elements regarding atmosphere, humidity, light, etc. So there are elements that we can integrate into this. Now, had a few conversations with music curation companies, like Open Ear was in the room, so we can look at, okay, we bring the type of music, but at what levels is being played and vice versa. So that's something that we'll look at as well. Now, that's the dashboard. And the technology in the room is, again, the hub here. There are 2 beacons hanging, and the idea would be that we can have larger spaces like this where we have 7, probably 8 beacons. And the idea of wiring all of them will take ages. So any questions on that, happy to talk further, but just conscious of time. And what next? Well, without any lockdowns in the foreseeable future, we want to hit 1,000 venues certified for sound by the end of next year. Now, I think we're on the right track. The fact that it took 16 months to do the first, it doesn't mean that it's going to take another, I don't know how many years to do 1,000. So we're moving very quickly on that front. Now, I would like to invite on stage our lovely panelists. If you check the menu, you will see product, deck, you will see the panelists, you will see a certified for sound white paper. There are a few elements that you can have a look at. Any more in-depth information, please get in touch. And I will please, if you can join me on stage, Karen, Lane. The way the panel talks are happening just very, very openly. It's usually 40 minutes of a few people talking on stage and everyone else checking their Instagram and LinkedIn or whatever. So I thought I'll do a quick 30 seconds, 1 minute questions. So thank you everyone for joining. You will notice a slight change. Tor, who's joining instead of Lorenzo Piccinati, who was sending his apologies, doesn't feel very well, and he hasn't been very well for a few days. So we are just going to be hurrying up. I know I'm not the best moderator on the planet, but I will do my best to be a good friend and have a really good conversation. Now, if you can please, in 30 seconds or less, tell us why you're here and what you do. And we can start.
Sure. I'm Leonidas. I'm the venue operations manager at Bridge, and I'm here because we can work with Mumbli and getting some audio devices installed and acoustic panel.
And I'm Lorraine, and I'm here because I love chatting and talking. And when I do that, I really like to hear what the other person's saying. And fewer and fewer places in the world allow me to do that easily. And I have normal hearing. So I want to see that change.
And I'm Tor, and why am I here? And I was moved into this at the very last minute. There's two reasons. One is my wife is telling me that I don't listen to her anymore. Is anyone else married and heard that? And I'm not sure whether it's her or it's me, but I realized that my hearing used to be absolutely excellent, is not anymore, and it's probably likely to be worse and worse. I got lots of grey hair, and it's not getting any less of it at the moment. So I also want to do something good for the world with my experience. So part of this, of having grey hair, is that you made all the mistakes you can make in technology. And my background is in scaling startup companies. And we'll come back to that at a later date. And by the way, talk to us afterwards as well. We're all approachable people. Talk to us. We're more than willing to talk at length.
Hi, good morning everyone. I'm Corinne Hawkins. I'm Sustainability and Innovation Manager at LLDC, working closely with Emma Frost. I have been involved in the journey with Mariam and Mumbli pretty much from the start. To an extent, I have been one of the key people to make this project a reality on the park, so it has been a very rewarding experience.
Good morning, I'm Nick. I'm here because, very much like others, I love conversations, I love talking to people, and I'm really frustrated at the number of places I go which try to make that difficult. My background, I'm a physicist. I've been working for the past 10 years or so developing Bluetooth audio standards and working with hearing aid companies. And I just really love what Marion and Mumbli are trying to do to make this a world where we can get rid of the annoyance of background noise and actually talk to each other.
Okay, great, thank you. Really good 2.5 minutes. Start. Excellent. So I'll move on to the second question, and it's to do with Mumbli's blue sky ambition to embed hearing wellness in the future of smart cities design. And when it comes to implementing change and innovation, is this kind of gap between desire and actual implementation. So if you can say in 1 minute or less, I know, from where you're standing, what your role has been with Mumbli or in enabling Mumbli to be embedded, what were the challenges and what do you think are the challenges moving forward? 1 minute or less.
Sure. For myself at Hackney Bridge, in an operations role, I don't have too much time to get involved with stuff like this. So it's great that we have Mumbli who are experts in the field. I know sound, I know volume, but these guys know everything else, you know, and it's fantastic that. For me, it's not something I need to worry about. You guys came in, you did all the tests. I could take a back seat, which was fantastic. And you guys led the way. But for me, that was fantastic.
What was the challenge? What do you think the challenge is for someone like you in your role to implement technology that is not necessarily your first language?
It's knowledge. Knowledge. What do I know about sound? I can manage a venue. You guys are the experts. For me, the idea of me doing all this research and trying to manage a project like this myself is quite intimidating.
Okay. Thanks. 1 minute less.
Good luck with that. I think you hit the nail on the head, actually, Marion, when you played the track earlier of restaurant noise, which was horrific, I'm sure, to everyone. And at the end of that, you said, the reason it's particularly annoying is because you haven't got a restaurant mindset on at the moment. You're here expecting to hear well. And I think it's awareness is the biggest problem at the moment and is the biggest barrier to progress and implementation, because we have become accustomed to accepting unacceptable noise levels in our social spaces. We think it means it's an energetic, great place to be if it's loud and noisy. So I think a real problem is people becoming aware that that is not necessary, and it's not actually good for you. It's not good for your actual ears, but it isn't good for your social relationships either. So I think a big challenge ahead of us is just raising people's awareness of how important it is to chat to each other and how it can be a lot easier and a lot more pleasant if you take care of the sound.
Thank you. So mine is slightly different from the others because I think you see Mumbli's got a really good team that's taken Mumbli where it is at the moment. A lot of the hard work on the academic side, the development side has been taken. Part of my background and the reason I'm here, I assume, I hope so, is that we need to take it to the next level. You saw the ambition of rolling out 1,000 of these spaces by 2024. It's ambitious, but it also means the company must change. When we talk about installing one of these devices takes 3, 4, 5 hours. As a matter of fact, it probably takes 2 days with all the planning. I'll multiply that by 1,000 venues, and you'll see how many people you need to do that. It's quite intimidating. We need 100 employees to do that. That's not going to happen. So we need to be better at scaling this company, or we need to be good at scaling this company. From where it is at the moment, with a brilliant idea, with some funding to do that, and with you guys in here, we now need to get the knowledge of this out there, and we need to be able to do the boring stuff at the back end, by developing the software that's needed to scale this, developing the internal systems that's necessary to get the hardware out, to get it into venues, and to get data back quickly. And on top of that, we need to develop the company, because these devices, we talk about one dimension of them at the moment. I think there's so much more you can do, both with the data and the software at the back end. And that's what the market and the investors want to see as well. So, simple. So my task is to make this come true in all this. I'm working hard with, hey, Adam at the back there hasn't slept for days because I keep on chasing him for talking to the developers in India, talking to the guys out in Italy, talking to people everywhere to get this going and getting the discipline in to become a professional delivery company. Does that make sense? Yeah. Bug me about it afterwards. Thank you.
So challenges. I'm gonna try and cram as many as I can in 1 minute.
I know.
I think for me there's different scales of challenges. If we start with the kind of micro level, the venue level challenge, a typical example would be there's a lease agreement between the venue owner, venue operator, and that agreement prevents you from changing anything to the structure or even attaching something to the structure. And therefore, when acoustics isn't built into the design, retrofitting it is going to be a lot more complicated. It's going to be potentially a lot more expensive, and that adds another barrier to the process. Second challenge, I think there's a misconception around what it takes to make a venue more accessible, and we should probably start to pursue some of the quick wins here. Acoustic panels are great, they're very effective, the impact is immediately visible. But for me, the biggest elephant in the room is music. And I don't think that's a topic that's being discussed enough, and you mentioned it just earlier. It's, there's a tendency to keep it loud. It's used as a stimulant to consumption. So there's a cultural shift that needs to happen about our perception of music and what it brings to a venue, because it doesn't cost anything to turn the volume down, but it will make a lot more people happier in the space. And I think finally the third challenge that I can think of is that we have a tendency to compartmentalize the issue of audio accessibility as being just kind of an inclusion issue or a health and safety issue, and we're not really looking at this holistically as a public health issue. And by doing that, we then we all bear the responsibility to make it better, and we feel like we can all play a part in changing it.
I very much echo that one about the health effects. If you look at the last 100 years, we've lived really through two major health issues. The first one was smoking, where everybody smoked, and we finally realised it's not a good thing. We're all currently tackling the issue of obesity, diabetes, and everything else that follows. Hearing loss is just as significant a disease, but people tend not to think about it. There's still this stigma of somebody's wearing a hearing aid, or they're probably getting old and doddery. The fact is there's increasing evidence that if you have hearing loss, it leads to increased risks of dementia, you become more solitary. You end up with actually a fairly lonely and unhappy old life. And we need to make people realise that's a real issue that we need to tackle. Probably audience participation time. How many of you have ever walked into a restaurant, thought it's too noisy, and walked back out again? And yet, we still accept this as the culture, that somehow, it's like the Alan Bourdain thing, that it's the chefy thing, you've got to have the noise, you've got to have all of that, and basically sod the customer, they don't matter. We need to really, all of us, stand up and say, this isn't acceptable. And I think this is one of the big things, both the World Health Organization has got regulations out today, but they're basically bits of paper and regulations. It needs every one of us to start to say to people, you're not providing the world I want to live in. We want quiet cities. We want to be able to talk to each other, and we need to enable that. And the challenge is Corsair. My background is in startups, and particularly in hardware, going from making 1 or 2 devices to going up to making millions is incredibly difficult. It's going to be a real challenge. It's one of the things I'm hoping I can use experience to help Mumbli with. But it's not just those of us in the room. The whole world needs to do this and manage the noise pollution around us. And I really hope we can manage it.
Thank you. Thanks. I wanted to open up the conversation, the audience, questions and answers. And if I would have been extremely well prepared, I would have had that lined up here, but I don't. So I need someone from the team to help me with that, Jasmine, with the Q&A's access. Whereas, meanwhile, I can use this think. So I'll just show it at you somewhere. Very good.
I did have a question actually, building on what Nick said. What do you think the learnings are from smoking and the parallels are? I mean, when I grew up, it was everywhere. You went every venue. I knew lots of smokers. It was inconceivable that we would get to where we got to. So that surely there's lots of parallels and learnings that can be leveraged from that, something that seemed impossible but was a public health issue. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think the learning and unfortunate one is it takes a very long time. There are a lot of vested interests that will still say we want to keep things as they are. And we shouldn't forget that it's not just restaurants and venues that have a culture. There's also a whole music industry that is out there saying, make it noisy. And it really amazed me. I mean, when Spotify launched their lossless service last year, you had Billie Eilish and others being recorded saying, we want to say just turn it up and make it louder. There's a very, very profitable, sort of not very well-known industry making hearing aids for rock stars. And basically saying, let's sort of embed this into your wig, into the collar of your shirt, whatever, so that nobody knows you've basically lost your hearing by doing what you're doing and by inflicting it on all of your followers. We have an industry out there that is, not intentionally, but working to damage our hearing. Same way that the cigarette companies were. We probably need to work out how you demonise that. So there's interesting conflicts that I think we're going to come up across. We're only starting the conversation. I mean, the first discoveries about the issues with cigarettes came out in the 30s. It's amazing that we've turned it off, but it took 70 years. I really hope it's not going to happen, because if this carries on, we're looking at future generations that will probably, everybody will have hearing loss in their 20s.
Go. Hi, Vern. Oh, stand up. Hi. Yeah, I think it was in the 70s that R. Murray Schafer said that we'd reached an apex of vulgarity in our time with our soundscape, and that was in the 70s. So I get the point around the long-term mission here. I think you know, architects and architectural spaces has a lot to play into this, because I run a company, and we might be the bad guys in there because we do provide music to a lot of things. You mentioned opening your music. I started the company 15 years ago, and with the ambition of really trying to help the acoustic spaces, because music doesn't have to be the bad guy. The problem is when music is raised above the level of the noise, and then the noise level goes up, and then the music level goes up, and then you're in this cacophony that doesn't help anyone. One of the major issues we've got, because I've worked for 15 years talking to venue operators, is studies that have been done that show that profit margins go up, people drink faster, they consume more alcohol when the noise levels are up. You know, they talk faster, they're less inclined to have these conversations that we all want to be having, and they're going backwards and forwards to the bar because they can't hear anyone speak. That is the issue that we're really contending with here with the operators side of things, because if they make more money from the noise levels you have, what is the motivation for them reducing the levels? So I'm with you on this fight. You know, we do provide music, and I entered into this industry to try and help with the acoustic environment, to try to educate people. The first thing I did was talk to architects and designers about how they design the space. I got a lot of no's and pushback and saying music and sound is not part of the conversation we're having with people that are making these buildings. That's the major issue, is that they have to accept that every sense is important when they're designing these spaces. And then when we do that, then we can have music at a nice level, we have conversation at a nice level.
I caught it. I'm so happy I managed to catch it. Actually, first thing is, I love this. It's brilliant. I really want one of these for all of our events. I wanted to follow on from that actually, and also something that came across really well in the film that you showed, which was brilliant. I'm wondering, you picked out really clearly about the design of spaces, and we all know that prevention is better than cure. Are there any single big design changes that we should be making or thinking about making in the way that we think about venues and some of the surfaces or the qualities that we tend to use, because it was picked up on a couple of times how a very kind of on-trend hard surface industrial look, we see it a lot in loads of venues across London and even just in the park. Are there any really clear learnings that we should be adopting or changes in some of our design practices that would help us better understand acoustic levels in venues and changes that we should be making?
Sorry, my bad.
So I'm going to have a go at that, and then so it's interesting because until I experienced the problem, I didn't think about it, and I did. So in high school I did an architecture high school, and it was not a thing. Now, I think buildings are designed and have been designed historically to be functional rather than experiential. So now lately, and I think Singapore is taking the lead on that idea of embedding sustainability, embedding innovation without calling it inclusivity. It's just a norm. Just build something for everyone. So I think because 30% of adults have a hearing challenge, tinnitus, or we take 50% of people have an issue with background noise, which I found incredible. I think it's about designing with those categories in mind, and then it's a matter of questions being asked rather than a very clear set of bullet points. So I think the short answer would be engaging with the different communities that the specific buildings are being designed for. And I think that would help bring along acoustics and sound and soundscapes and music, etc. The quality of sound as well is important. Yeah.
Just a very quick addition to that. I absolutely agree with everything that's been said, and I think as well as that, we do need to do something, and each of us can do something to just raise people's awareness of it, because the thing that will lead design more powerfully than anything else, whether you're talking about architecture or anything else, is consumer demand. The responsiveness of the users of the venue to that venue. And at the moment, venue users or city users, or anyone else for that matter, generally speaking, are not aware of how important it is for them and for their business needs or their social needs or whatever to hear well. It just isn't a thing. So I think we can all have a bit of that conversation going on, and we go into a place that's too noisy to have a chat, you can say to the venue owner. And it's little bit by little bit by little bit. So as well as all the World Health Organization going back to the smoking legislation in the end was needed to sort that problem. We need better general public awareness of the importance of our hearing. Not of hearing loss, not as a disability, but something that we all do and we all need. And we could all do it much more easily and more enjoyably if the world around us were managed differently from an acoustic point of view.
I think I was just going to add that venues face a new challenge, which is what was traditionally just your midweek coffee shop or your Friday evening bar, and all these venues are becoming a lot more multi-purpose. It's not like we have the workplace and then we have the non-workplace venue. So how do you deal with that change where people will spend a lot more time in venues that traditionally are, busy? I think again that goes back to awareness, and unfortunately the regulations are still, a little bit behind on that front. They separate the working, the workplace from the non-workplace, and also the noise regulations don't cover people who make informed decisions about going to noisy places, and the key word here is informed. I don't think people have the tools to preempt or assess how noisy a place is going to be. So going back to our trial with Mumbli, one of the great things we've done is that we've made sound and the understanding of sound a lot more visual, because sound is still a very abstract concept, it's also very relative, it's very personal, we all feel it differently. But now we have indicators, we have a dashboard, and we can all start to relate to this, and I think that's been one of the greatest achievements of this project, is making sound more visual.
So I've got a slightly different take on this. I always do have a slightly different take on most things. How many people do you see walking around with these days? I'm sure a lot of you already have it. And why do we have them at the moment, especially during COVID? Because we go into Starbucks or somewhere and have a conversation. We do a video conference or a voice conference from there, and you use these as a device to block out the sound around you. There are two ways of blocking out the sound. One is to design the venue correctly, and part of my background is in audio engineering and building studios and speakers for studios. So that's one way of doing it. The other one is to use devices. But to use devices and to find something out of it, you need data. The difference between when we got rid of smoking in rooms and now is that one, we can fairly easily, as we see here, produce data about the sound levels and the impact sound has on us. And we've got social media, which has changed dramatically, when each of us can influence the venue operators much more easily. Whenever I go to passport control, at least in Norway, there's a little button pressed, but did you have a good experience, a bad experience, or an indifferent experience? That's the kind of thing we should get venue operators to start doing as well. But I will also say, looking at the number of people that sit with these headphones in, you see it everywhere, on trains, on planes, in venues, you know that there's something about the acoustics. And I find it fascinating that one of the biggest employers of good acoustic engineering at the moment is Apple. And they're doing a lot with these as almost like hearing aids at the moment. And I don't know how many looked at the accessibility panels in their iPhone lately, but it's changing. It is changing. Pressure on Apple or anyone else, plus venue operators, will help. At least that's my prediction. But to do that properly, you need data. This is where Mumbli comes in. It's producing the data to change the world.
I'd like to come on to that.
Sorry, we'll give it another 5 minutes because we'll have to clear the room in about 35, 40 minutes. So please.
So, I mean, a lot of the work I do is with hearing aid and earbud companies, and there's a massive amount of very clever engineering coming on that will do noise cancellation. There's a flip side to that we don't know the answer to, which is that generally occludes your ear, so you have a higher moisture build-up, more humidity in the air. We don't know whether that's going to cause a problem long term. And the answer comes back to how do we make better venues? I think the question you've all been asked, which would you rather lose sort of its sight or hearing? Throw that back to the architect, because in a way they're responsible. Today, an architect will show you lots of 3D visualizations, lots of little models, and it's all about looking at the venue. We need to ask architects, what will it sound like? And if the architects today lost their sight, God knows what would happen to them. Now, we now have things like the guidance from the WHO, and anybody commissioning the building should be saying to the architect, look, is it going to meet this? How does it comply? And as we said before, there is a way that we can probably all provide feedback, because if you go to a venue and you find it unbearable and you don't like it, give it a 1-star review, because people pick up on those very quickly. It's not something I ever like to do, but it is one thing we have in our power to start to make a small change to say, if the noise levels are unacceptable, make that public. And that may change things.
I think there needs to be greater awareness that hearing wellness, acoustics, audio accessibility should become a right. I think we've been led to believe for a long time that good acoustics are only to be found in concert halls, And even if that's not necessarily true, but I think we just start to shift our attention and our focus on the more everyday places, the more ordinary places that people visit and use on and on. So in this trial, for example, with Marion, we have focused very largely on the community hubs because for me, it is a priority really that we look at the spaces that perhaps haven't had the kind of massive architectural budget or where design was kind of a bit of an afterthought. So we need to start with those at a local level. This is where we need to start.
So the challenge has been translating sound into wheelchair accessibility is very obvious. You obviously see the person can't go up the stairs, but when it comes to audio accessibility, it's very difficult to address. I think there was a question. Sorry.
If there is time, have the microphone. It's up to you.
Yeah, no, we still have.
Yeah, I was to comment on what you were saying. I think it will be a huge challenge to get everybody to be more vocal about the potential damages, unless you get the NHS involved. I mean, this is a responsibility of the NHS as well. So I'm sure that not the startup, that's not the angle they want to take, but don't underestimate the importance of the NHS to make this successful. My question is more regarding the test, Marion, if you have a minute to comment. Have you had any feedback from the venues as to the possibility of implementing the same in other venues? Feedback from the managers or the owners of those places, elsewhere in the city, elsewhere in the country, just to understand what kind of engagement on the benefits that they see that happen. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I would take a few minutes to answer that, because the concept of a startup is you solve a problem, build a product, get investment, make money, whatever, sell it at some point. Whereas in our case, we're solving a problem that is so complex, that requires expertise, requires patience, requires time, money, to first prove to the right stakeholders that there's a problem, to then get them to pay for the service of the product. So by having this 6-month pilot, where of course none of the venue operators had to pay. Like I'm sure if I would have come to you, Leonidas, and say, we're doing this and it costs X, even though I would have said £200, then £200 I'm going to get someone to clean the space or something. So there's that challenge. But where we are now, I'm proud to say we have 4 years later, and some of the people in the team have been involved for long enough to see that challenge. Is that we're seeing people seeing this as a massive, massive add-on to the corporate social responsibility element. So audio accessibility and inclusivity coming out of this is something that large groups having conversations, large hotel groups, hospitality groups that see this as an absolute must to add. And what's really incredible is that the World Health Organization has launched a global standard today for venues to have sound monitoring, acoustic optimization, and to limit the decibel levels. So I think with that, we're armed pretty solidly to then have those conversations. From the venues that we had, there was never a case of, right, there's going to be a 6-month trial and they have to pay for it. Because we do want to champion people who have gone with us through the journey at the beginning, to get the technology, to have the time. I think Signorelli one afternoon just closed the place so we can install panels and do this and that. And at the time it was more, okay, we're going to let you do it, but we're not sure why we're doing this. Now, of course, the change is there, so it's solvable. I hope that answers the question. So I think we need to stop here, and obviously I think everyone would be happy to expand these conversations further. I I would like to invite everyone to Hackney Bridge for lunch. It's a 10% voucher. I'm sure the traders would love to have us there. But it's also, we're going to have the dashboard on the screen showing live the experience and the numbers and what it looks like. So I think it's coupling the two if you want to join us at Hackney Bridge. We do need to clear the room at, I think we have a cut-off at 11:40. So I'm not saying you should get out, but thank you. I think if you do want to join the hearing wellness movement, and if you do want to not help, to help, we have help, and that's great. But if you want to get involved, if you really want to get involved, this is what we need. And the funding element has already started, so we have some early investments coming through, which is amazing. Because all this work has been done in bootstrapping, and kind of, which is fantastic, very rewarding in the end. And then we're launching the beta app. So Tor is actually very modest. Chief architect at Toyota Connect Europe, and he's been helping us in the last 8 months now, kind of as an interim CTO. So quite impressive amount of work has gone into that lately. We haven't shown the app today because it wasn't about the app, but we need about 20 beta testers and demo hiring. And that's kind of concludes, I think, today. We have the Hearing Wellness Festival as well, so have a look at that. And otherwise, I thank you very much for coming. I'm sure it wasn't great to travel 3 hours and now travel 3 hours again. Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks.
Thank you, Mary, for putting all this together. Oh, please, wrap us on.